Hello, I'm Gerald Thompson. I'm a candidate for city commissioner, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to talk with you here this morning. I am a child of Ashland, born and raised here, who went off for a while and did other things, and thinks I have gained some experiences and so forth that can be useful here. I My wife, who is also an Ashland native, we graduated from high school here together in 1964. Didn't meet again for nearly 50 years. There's another story there, but we can tell you that whenever you want another conversation. Basically, 3 years ago, we both decided that we wanted to come back to Ashland, and here we are. Um, I I am not someone who thinks that I have been to the mountain and gained the wisdom to solve all of Ashland's difficulties and am prepared to lead you to the promised land. That's not my agenda at all. I just think that I have acquired some skills and some experiences that can be useful. I love my hometown. I love the people here. And I think that we have significant challenges ahead of us. I think I can be helpful. I say I'm a child of Ashland. I graduated from high school, got my bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech, and was a co-op at Armco for 5 years. So I'm a child of Armco as well. And I understand the issues associated with what Armco has meant to this community. And I know something about the steel making and metalworking business as well. At any rate, while in college, I was taking ROTC at the same time. I graduated with a 4-year contract to be an officer. And I went off to do that in 1970 and discovered that I loved it. I was pretty good at it. And when the end of the 4 years came, I took a look around and I said, I know what being an engineer is like, and I know what this is like, and this is just simply more fun. And so I resolved that I would continue to do that until it wasn't fun anymore, and then I would probably come back home. It never stopped being fun. I was an infantryman and a special forces officer for a bit over 10 years, and somewhere around the early 1980s, the Army chose to make me what they call a Middle East Foreign Area Officer. And I became a Middle East guy for the Army. I did 2 years of Arabic language school with the State Department in Tunis, and subsequently I served assignments in Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, Yemen. Life goes on. I had region-wide responsibilities at European Command and also at the Joint Staff and later with the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Now, I don't want to belabor this too much, but you probably will find it useful to know that I've been deeply involved in the Iraq problem for practically 30 years. And indeed, the first time I went to Iraq was in 1983. 1992 to 94, I was involved in the humanitarian crisis with the Kurds in northern Iraq. This was much more of a civics problem than you would think. And from that comes a lot of the experiences of conflict resolution, dispute resolution, distribution of benefits, taking care of people that I think are relevant to being a city commissioner. I was the senior American in northern Iraq from May of 93 until about June of 95. Subsequently went on and with the regime change operation in 2003, returned to Iraq again with the Coalition Provisional Authority. You can think of it as the occupation government, right there after regime change until 2005. I was the guy that was responsible for designing and beginning the work to reestablish the Iraqi Ministry of Defense. Again, that's a governance job. Subsequently, came back to the States. I was already by that time out of uniform and working as a civilian. I was a leader of a little outfit called the Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies at National Defense University for a year. And then I wandered off into quasi-academia, government consultant, contractor, pay me money, I write you a paper. And I've had a great deal of fun with that. It's given me an opportunity to read, study, reflect. And frankly, I've learned a lot more since I left government service than I knew when I was in government service. That's just the way it goes. For the last practically 14 years, one of my contracts has been to run Iraq familiarization training for the State Department. I've taught a course that prepares our people who go to Iraq, those who work under the ambassador's authority. So basically everybody that has served in the embassy in Iraq or our consulates has been through my little course in Washington for the last 14 years. It's been great fun. They're great people. I don't claim to have imparted special wisdom to them, but I think we have had mature, candid, and from the feedback, it's been helpful discussions about the tasks that they were going to enter upon. I've had a military career. A lot of people these days have a stereotype of what that means. My career, you can tell, has been somewhat eclectic, but I want to ask you to think for a minute. Being a soldier is not being an automaton. It is not following orders regardless. Being a soldier requires a great deal of thinking. And as you begin to soldier at higher and higher levels, you become more and more imbued with the ethic of service. And you realize that what you are doing as a soldier, as a diplomat, as a statesman, is serving something larger than yourself, not prosecuting your own agenda. I've had the privilege of doing that. I suppose this is the time to brag a little bit, if bragging is the right word. But I've represented the uniformed military to the interagency in Washington. I've been the guy in the room that spoke for the Pentagon on issues. I've had the privilege of sitting at the big oak table in the basement of the White House in the Situation Room, and I understand the discussions that take place there. I understand the gravity of those discussions, and I can tell you that, at least in my experience, the things that motivate people in those conversations is an ethic of service. And I hope that I have internalized that. I believe that I have. So I come back to Iraq, to Ashland, and I think that my experience has exposed me to the challenges of governance from the lowest level. I have helped resettle villagers on the sides of mountains in Iraq, to the tactical operational level, to the level of policy and overall structure of governance. It's been a privilege. I've learned that the things that are important there are, first of all, openness, transparency, accountability, and respect. When we're dealing with people, and believe me, I've dealt with people with different points of view. I've had Kurds in the room with Turks. I've had Israelis in the room with Saudis. The message you must communicate first is that everybody is respected, whatever they say, whatever they believe, and that what you have to pick out of their points of view is what are their real concerns, what are their, we call them grievances. There are less polite words that we might use, but what is it that is under their skin? You need to probe that and understand that, because if you're going to have a solution, that has to be dealt with, even if you don't agree with it personally yourself. But somewhere in the middle of these different views, you can find a consensus point, and that's the second thing that is an important thing to know, is it's not always a question of what is the best thing to do. I'm sorry, I wish it was. But you have to stay within the realm of the possible. And sometimes that's a bit uncomfortable for everybody. Openness, accessibility, transparency, respect, and then at the end of the day, the sense that everybody's issue has been dealt with fairly. We don't live in a resource unconstrained world. Lord knows we know that here in Ashland. Ashland has a problem with resources. And so to simply have someone present themselves at the table with an issue and crack the gavel down and have that problem resolved to that individual's satisfaction, that's probably never going to happen. But we have to be able to have that person leave. The objective would be to have that person leave the table believing that their problem has been dealt with fairly. My personal convictions, I'm convinced that while Ashland faces daunting challenges, we can find a way, but we must work together as a community. There's several parts to this. It's not just in empty rhetoric. When people around Ashland still speak much the same language I remember when I was growing up here. There is Ashland and there is the county, and they are different things somehow. But the issues that we're facing now, these cannot be different things. And in fact, it's even bigger than that. Take the issue with Our Lady of Bellefonte Hospital and so forth right now. I've actually heard people here in Ashland discuss that in the context of being a Russell problem or a Greenup County kind of a thing that only touches Ashland on the periphery. It belongs to all of us, and we all have to embrace it. And for Ashland to think that it is going to noodle around with this problem by itself and reach satisfaction, I think that scope is simply too limited. We're going to have to work with our brothers and sisters, our neighbors, the communities around us. That's going to require a different kind of mindset. I think it is the role of the City Commission to lead. It is, after all, the Ashland City Commission. So we have to be conscious of where the boundaries of our authority lie and where the limits of our resources lie. But that doesn't mean that we can't reach out and talk to other people and bring them into the room too. Be a catalyst, if you will, for a bigger look and a cooperative spirit. I would say that the key lies somewhere around the notion of placing the Council of Commissioners at the nexus of a rather complex web of networks It's not all political relationships. It's not just the city of Russell, the city of Ashland, the city of Catlettsburg, and the associated county governments. Those are the black and white boundary lines. But within this, we have other communities. We have a faith community. Doesn't always behave as a community. And you can say the same as the rest of the other communities that we have. We have a business community that is very much concerned with traffic through the door and retail. We have what I will call a developmental community that involves some light industry. We still make things around here and sell them. But there's also the idea of future development, real estate, and each of these groups of people, for good reason, is focused on their concerns and their rice bowl. But we're going to have to bring these people together and see where the intersections are that we can develop for the good of all of us. We've got a substantial issue with addiction and homelessness in town. And when you delve into that, you'll find there's another whole community of people that opens up. And unfortunately, there are people who don't experience that problem who would like to just look past that. You know, there's a certain, what people refer to as a NIMBY approach, NIMBY, not in my backyard, that some folks adopt when the prospect of really coming to grips with the problems of addiction and homelessness and dealing with them as a community are raised. This is not just a humanitarian concern. This is your workforce you're talking about. And if Ashland, Boyd County, the region around us, if we're going to grow and prosper, we've got to develop and maintain, and we're building on a solid base. People that say we've got a wonderful workforce here, they're not wrong. But that workforce is ill, and it's got to be treated, it's got to be developed, it's got to be maintained. It's going to take all of us working on it together. We've got to embrace this. When I first came back to Ashland, and I attended some city commission meetings back in, let me think, I believe it was October of 2017. I went to a couple of meetings, and then I stood up one day and sort of announced myself. I said, I see two things here that concern me. And the first one was, we don't have a belly button for our addiction problem. We've got a lot of people here doing a lot of good work. In some ways they are cooperating, in some ways they are competing. This is a very complex problem. It needs a systematic approach. It needs a belly button. And I think that the belly button should be here in the city government. This city government has not owned this problem. Now, my example for that, to be perfectly clear, I didn't just dream this up out of thin air. It is Huntington. And some of you have probably seen some of the publicity that Huntington has put out and so forth about how they've pulled their effort together, brought it under the purview of the mayor and their Office of Drug Control Policy and so forth. I'm not saying we need to mimic Huntington exactly, but it's the idea that the community needs to embrace this problem. The community needs a belly button that people can go to express their problems and to begin to stimulate solutions. We've got political issues too, which I raised in that same discussion. these are in some ways transparent to many of our citizens, but I think it's the duty of the city commission to bring them onto the table and give visibility to them. What I'm talking about specifically is the way the boundary lines are drawn in our political districts here in town. Some of you may not be aware, but if you look at a district map, you'll see that Boyd County has been split right in two in terms of congressional district. Half of Boyd County is in the 5th congressional district, half is in the 4th district. What this means to you is you don't have a congressman. You've been essentially neutered in terms of expressing your concerns at the federal level. It's also to a certain extent true at the state level. Now, people talk about districting as a partisan issue. And yeah, districting goes on in this country as a partisan issue. We talk about gerrymandering and one party taking advantage of another. That's not what we have here. This is a bipartisan issue. Our political entity right here has been neutered because we've been divided deliberately. We need to think of ways to pull this back together. Now, interesting, this is 2020. This is a census year. The legislature is going to redraw all of those district lines. I think that the Ashland City Commission, the Ashland City government, in combination with the other governments around us, needs to express this concern in that process. FiveCo, the 5-county development area here around us, it's functioned as sort of an economic cooperation arrangement, and that's good, that's fine. But we need something like that to assert itself in this districting process, so that we come out of it as a region of Kentucky that is able to express ourselves both at the state and at the federal level. That's not just a city of Ashland problem, but the city commission can lead. We can bring people together. We need to energize our citizens to participate in this census process. Don't throw that envelope in the trash can. Fill it out, because that's the way you get counted, and that's the way we'll address this issue. So these were the two things that I brought up back there in October 2017. I still think they're issues today. We need a belly button for our addiction, homelessness problem. We need to be sure that we have a voice at the state and the federal level. Now, there's other things that, of course, we can enumerate. The city's working on a comprehensive plan right now. I think it's a great effort. For what I'm talking about, though, I think the comprehensive plan is more of an operational design. It can help us enormously in assigning priorities and allocating resources in the budget as we move forward for the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years, which is the intended duration of the comprehensive plan. So I don't want to denigrate that effort at all. It's absolutely necessary. But we need to bring people together with even a larger vision of what this region, and I'm speaking of the region now, Ashland as a part of it, what will we be? And so what my vision is that we should be a platform on which our citizens can work out their individual aspirations in terms of employment opportunities, income. What do you want to build? How do you want to contribute? The city can't solve those problems for you. It can't provide, but it can establish a functioning base. This takes you to looking at the infrastructure, a big issue in the comprehensive plan, as it should be. Okay, so that's all fine, but we need to think beyond that, I believe. My vision for the Ashland area is we need a university. Look at what happens when you put a university into a community. Look at Pikeville, and look at down in Maysville and northern Kentucky. A university is, look at Moorhead. Uh, you, a university becomes a center, um, an incubator, if you will, for ideas and workforce development, providing skills and education as well as research, analysis. It's a wonderful thing for a community. We're not going to have a university in 3 to 5 years. We've got a great educational institution here now in terms of ACTC, and it's doing productive things. But I would like for us to raise our sights a bit and ask ourselves, where do we want ACTC to be in 10 years? I certainly want to see it be a university by that time. We need an airport. Oh my God, that's a huge thing. It's a tremendous investment. When you raise that many times in some circles around town, it's my God, we can't do that. We have to do that. We have to do that. The Huntington Airport has served admirably for a number of years, but it is limited in its ability to expand. The one thing that we've got to contribute here around Ashland is we've got available territory, and we've got a great location that can be a regional hub. We need this for our community. And so bottom line, my vision for Ashland is as a hub and a platform, not just for Ashland itself, but as a hub for what I will call an integrated 5-co entity. And that's where I would like to see us go. Long after my time. Why do I want to be a commissioner? I hope you see it in my face and in my voice. I love this place. I love these people. I want to see these people and this place prosper, and I am sure they can. I have skills, I have experience that I think can contribute. I've learned, sometimes the hard way, about respect, openness, transparency, building consensus, and compromise. And these are the skills that I think are essential to being an effective commissioner.